Here at Gillette Stadium, I'm Mike Petraglia alongside Patriots expert columnist Christopher Price for WEEI.com. Chris, this week the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the slate here at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots are 2-0. They've won both of their games by a very small margin, as a matter of fact, by 5 points. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as Bill Belichick has reminded us this week, are 2 plays away from being 2-0. They're 0-2, having lost by just a handful of points themselves. How do you read the matchup going in? What are some of the things we should be looking for?
I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I think these are two teams who've struggled a little bit. As you mentioned, the Patriots, just a couple plays away from being 0-2, while the Jets are a couple plays away from being 2-0. Buccaneers, I'm sorry about that. A couple plays away from being 2-0. So it really sets up. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for New England. I really do. I think that while Tampa Bay isn't an overwhelming team on both sides of the ball, they do some things that could present some matchup problems for the Patriots. They have a very good secondary. We know Goldson will be playing on Sunday, so that adds to the Patriots' problems. They have a big physical offensive line, and that's going to cause some problems for the Patriots' defensive front, which has been a strength to this point in the season. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two teams shake out. Again, I think it's going to be a really good matchup.
They scored 17 points in a loss to the New York Jets opening week. They scored just 14 points last week in their home opener. But Bill Belichick told us this week that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a big play team on both sides of the ball. Mason Foster, linebacker last week with an 85-yard interception return. They do have the capability of the big play.
They really do, and that's on both sides of the ball, like you mentioned, like Bill mentioned earlier this week, that you can look at what they do on defense, and they're able to get off the ball and do a really good job being very disruptive when it comes to turnovers. The other side of the ball, Vincent Jackson is an absolute beast, and he's a guy who they need to pay attention to him all over the field. That goes without saying. But they also have some really good other skill position players, including Doug Martin. Again, this is a team, as Bill mentioned, as we talked about, that has the capability to set up nicely for the big play.
This obviously is a team the Patriots very familiar with, having just 3 weeks or so practiced against them for several days in training camp. Obviously, they played against them in the preseason. But sometimes I think, Chris, we here in New England, and the fans in particular, can take for granted what a functional situation they have throughout the organization and certainly in the locker room. This week, reports of tension and strife inside the Tampa Bay locker room. Some of their leaders coming out and saying, admitting, Doug Martin saying, they're a star running back that you mentioned, saying, we've got some issues in this locker room, but we've got a long season to resolve them. Is a lot of this having to do with playing for Greg Schiano?
I think there's something to that. I think that some of the players might look at a guy who is a hardline coach and a guy who's never played it down in the league, and they look at a guy like that and they say, who is he to tell me how to play, how to go about my business? I've been in this league for an extended period of time. I know what's best for me.
But if you're Bill Belichick, you get away with that just because of the 3 rings.
Exactly. If you're a veteran like Belichick, who's been around for almost 40 years now, you can get away with that. But I think that's part of growing pains for a new team, a new coach. Honestly, winning solves all problems. So if they come in here, they beat the Patriots, they run off 3 or 4 straight, all of that talk is going to go by the wayside. I sincerely believe that.
Well, we certainly, Chris, don't expect Danny Amendola to play this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yes, he was at practice this week, but sort of going through the motions. You believe that it's pretty much a smokescreen. But the bigger story and the more likely return, of course, is Rob Gronkowski. You spoke to Rob Gronkowski in the locker room. What did he tell you about what he's learned while he's been on the sideline?
It's really interesting because I think when you're on the sidelines for an extended stretch like he's been, you get a new appreciation for the game. And that's not just a perspective, but you learn things and you see things that you didn't necessarily see when you're on the field on a regular basis. He's talked about learning different things and picking up different moves and really growing and evolving and adapting as a player. I thought that was fascinating to hear him say stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see the Gronk that comes out of this process, not just physically but mentally, how he's changed, how he's grown, how he's evolved as a player.
How many snaps does he get?
I think that's you know what, there's not even a question right now. Really, there's a question right now as to how much he's going to play. I think if he does play, I think you're going to see him out there for an extended period of time. I think that they're not going to put a guy on the field who's at 50%. Now, the rumors that we've heard, the reports that we've heard are at this point he is 50-50, according to ESPN, and I know the NFL Network also reported that he is more likely not to play than to play. I think in the end, I think we're going to see him push back a week. I don't think we're going to see him this week. I think we're going to see him next week against Atlanta. But again, it wouldn't shock me. You know, I'm done making, dealing in absolutes with this team. It wouldn't shock me to see him out here on the field on Sunday.
Another thing to take into consideration, Chris, obviously, is they're playing a Tampa Bay team that doesn't exactly light up the scoreboard. So maybe they do give him an extra week of rest. On the other side of the ball, Aqib Talib. I thought it was pretty important and significant of him to say, when given the chance to rip Nick Mangold of the New York Jets for hitting him from behind in the closing seconds of that Thursday night win here at Gillette Stadium, he thinks it was an accident. He doesn't hold anything against Mangold in particular. He's ready to move on. Moving on, you asked him about Vincent Jackson and what kind of special receiver he is.
I think this is a guy we talked about before. Vincent Jackson is a completely unique receiver in a lot of aspects, including the fact you never see a guy that big line up in the slot on a regular basis. 6'5", I think, 230, just an absolute beast of a player. He's going to be a really difficult guy to contain. He's had great numbers over the course of his career against New England for several reasons, not the least of which he's just an oversized slot receiver. Not just an oversized slot receiver, but he's an oversized slot receiver who's a very difficult matchup for this team. I think this game sets up very nicely as a Talib-Jackson showdown, because Talib, as we know, is not necessarily a number one shutdown corner, but when he was brought in here, he was brought in to shut down the bigger, faster, physical guys as opposed to the shorter guys, more the Andre Johnson types. Really, this is a guy in Vincent Jackson who fits into that category.
I don't know about you, Chris, but I was struck today by how relaxed Tom Brady was. He seemed much more relaxed. Maybe it was the extra time off. He made mention of it in his press conference with reporters that, we all got some extra rest, and anytime you can get extra rest during the course of a football season, you're going to feel better. Tom Brady seemed more relaxed. He also addressed the issue and took it head on that I have to be the beginning and the end of all communication issues and leadership issues. He's very well aware of what was said about the way he acted on the sideline against the Jets. Do you think he gets the message? And, is it more than just words from Tom Brady?
I do. I think he gets the message, and I think he realizes that when it comes to some of these younger receivers, acting like that is counterproductive to their overall growth, and it doesn't get them to where they need to be any faster if he's portrayed as a raving lunatic on the sidelines, quite frankly. So I think we're going to see less of that this week. I also think we've seen, at least in the case of Kenbrell Tompkins, some growth from week 1 to week 2. And I think what the Patriots want to see is they want to see him take it to the next level. Look, Dobson was in a really tough spot last week. No padded practices, came into his first NFL game, had the drops, clearly struggled at points. I think they're going to want to see progression. Really, that's what you're looking for at this point from those young receivers. They want to be able to show progression. They want to be able to show evolution. They want to show that they're getting better in that offense.
And who do you like?
I think the Patriots win this one. I think New England is really going to have just enough talent on both sides of the ball. It's not going to be a blowout. It's not going to be they're not going to roll over them. But I think New England ends up winning this thing. I'm going to say 23-14.
All right, Chris. Back to a regular schedule. I don't know what to make of it. The sun is out here at Gillette Stadium. We're back on a regular work week. All things are good in Patriot land as they try to go to 3-0 this Sunday against Josh Freeman and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For Christopher Price, I'm Mike Petraglia, WEEI.com.